as a Russian agent.
It sounds like, from what you're saying, it's possible that you may have discussed the easing of sanctions.
Something may have come up in a conversation. I have no recollection, and there is nothing specifically that I would have done that would have given people that impression, George.
But you can't say without equivocation that you didn't discuss the easing of sanctions.
Someone may have brought it up. I have no recollection, and if it was not something I was offering or someone was asking for.
Joining me now, Naveed Jamali, former FBI intelligence operative, author of How to Catch a Russian Spy. He worked as a double agent for the FBI against Russian military intelligence, as well as Miko Yang, former House Intel Committee staffer and director of the National Security Program at Third Way. Couldn't ask for two better people to unravel this. And Naveed, I want to say this as nicely as possible, without assuming anything. Carter Page requires some unpacking. What did you make of just that sound we played where he appears not to be able to definitively answer the sanctions question?
I think the fact that he wants to talk but can't answer anything is, at minimum, troubling. Look, Carter Page was known to the FBI, and the Russian connection dates back to 2015, this 2015 case involving an actual arrest, which is, if you follow espionage, it's very rare that there's an actual arrest, let alone prosecution. So Carter Page was known to the FBI in terms of talking to Russian intelligence officers for this 2015 case. And oddly enough, he was not prosecuted. He was sort of kicked loose. And then fast forward to 2016, now we know that there was a FISA warrant. So this is very, very odd. This is a man who clearly has a long history with Russia, at least predating the Trump campaign.
I want to play another soundbite for you here of him. And again, I want to get your response as an interrogator. This is Carter Page unwilling to say something simple, which is who brought him into the Trump campaign.
Who brought you into the Trump campaign? What did you do for them?
You know, George, I don't talk about that because there's always these various conspiracy theories that anyone I work with is.
But that's a pretty innocent fact. Who brought you into the campaign?
Well, I don't want to have people's lives disrupted.
Naveed, what would you make of that if you were interrogating him?
You know, he obviously wants to say something. He's playing an angle that's very clear. Again, he's coming in here and saying, I'm just a nice guy, but I want to be involved in this conversation, but I don't want to admit to anything. It seems like he really does want to admit to something. Look, he was in the nexus of 2015, fast forward to 2016. There's something here. I'm not sure exactly what his angle is, but as an interrogator, if I was sitting down with him, you know, I think a long conversation, I think he would probably clear up quite a few of these questions. I mean, the fact that he's in this nexus is not coincidence, and I think, you know, with Mr. Flynn asking for immunity, his options to sort of come clean are fastly eroding.
Mika?
Yes. So Carter Page's appearance on the campaign is a serious problem. And the real question is, who brought him in? And did that person have connections to the Russians or Europeans?
Go ahead.
And so I think that when he doesn't say who are the higher level folks who brought him into the campaign, he's holding that back. It's the only card he has left to play.
And Naveed, here's his former boss, someone that viewers may recognize, a pretty renowned expert, Ian Bremmer, on foreign affairs. And this is from The Guardian in an interview, basically saying that they, who previously employed him, viewed him as the most wackadoodle alumni of the firm in history. It was very clear he was ideologically very strongly pro-Kremlin, which wasn't at all clear when he was interviewed. As a result, he wasn't a good fit at your Asia group. That's through a spokesman for Bremmer's former boss. Wackadoodle, not a term of art in foreign policy circles, but would suggest, again, folks are trying to create their distance while he keeps doing TV interviews. And I'll add into the mix for your response, President Trump reportedly very upset that Carter Page won't be quiet.
Look, you know, as someone who lived with the Russians and understood sort of their profile for recruiting people, when you start looking at Page, when you start looking at Flynn, and you start looking at Manafort, it's very clear that these people most likely had connections with Russia that predates the Trump campaign. And when you think about what is the perfect profile for someone, for a Russian intelligence officer, it is someone who can be manipulated because of ego. And when I say that, look, I lived it. I know that this is from my experience. When I listen to Carter Page, I see someone who can be manipulated by ego. And frankly, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I have to wonder why he is going out and saying these things. It's great to hear it for TV, but you know, I don't know that he's getting anywhere, and he's certainly not answering the core question that everyone wants to know, which is how did he get into this, from this nexus of Russian intelligence, fast forward to 2016, how did he get on the Trump campaign? It is baffling. And you know, when you have Flynn and when you have Manafort, again with this old history, you have to wonder how all three got on the Trump campaign. It is certainly troubling.
It's remarkable. Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to give you 1 sec. I was just going to say to that point, it's remarkable. We live in a world where you get your news alerts, and it's always, oh, my God, what's the news alert? Anytime I get the pop-up news alert that Carter Page has done another interview, I'm always extra interested to click in, and he never disappoints in his ability, Mika, to seem to combine obfuscation with mystery, and it's why do the interview in the first place. So speak to that if you would, and also on the House Intel side, what do you think they're looking at this stage, given your expertise there?
Yeah, so if I were advising Carter Page, I would tell him, just stop talking, right? Both he and Roger Stone, whenever they go on television, they are continuously rambling on, creating a bad record for themselves and not answering any questions and just giving off the impression that they are hiding something or not telling the whole truth. It really isn't helping their case at all. Now, if I'm the committee staff, what I'm looking at here are the financial ties between these people. Manafort and Stone, part of the same lobbying firm. They have a whole stable full of clients who are shady characters around the world who've been involved in all kinds of sanctions evasion, black market deals, involved with Russian oligarchs. It really is the financial ties. And then you have to couple that with the lack of financial disclosure by the president himself and the real questions that he hasn't cleared up there about who was paying whom and what were they trying to get for it.
Right. Well, you're putting your finger on it, and it's sort of like the Facebook test for the Trump-Russia ties, which is who knows whom, who brought whom in, and what is questionable about that, particularly as the White House claims everybody who ever touched this was some, you know, volunteer. And then look at this, Naveed, in the context of the White House now saying it's not going to follow the precedent of other White Houses and not release visitor logs. They claim that it is because of the grave national security risks and privacy concerns of the hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. What do you think visitor logs might show, given the questions about who's really important and who's talking to whom on this case, Naveed?
Yeah, you know, I think that there's two things. First is the perspective that it puts out there. I think it's not a good one. There should be transparency here. And the second part is I think that there's genuine concern that the White House doesn't know what the FBI has. And because they don't know what the FBI has, they're concerned. Where are they looking? Look, at the end of the day, Ari, this very well could be what we've stumbled across on nothing more than a money laundering scheme, which, you know, it's less and less likely, but that could be a big part of it, and it could end there. I think that transparency would actually benefit the Trump team, would benefit the White House. Showing this information really... hiding it just makes it seem like you have something to hide. I mean, this is, you know, this is very straightforward. And look, the financial ties, just to piggyback on what Mika said, I think those are interesting. But at the end of the day, when it comes to individual recruitment, I have to take a little bit of exception with the word collusion. When a foreign intelligence officer recruits you, they're not looking to collude with you. They're looking to direct you. You are, in essence, going to be a directed and controlled asset. So financial information, important. Don't hide it. Be transparent. You know, you have nothing to hide. Let's see what's out there.
Well, yeah, you're doubling back on the point that Carter Page was making, which was basically he doesn't want to feed conspiracy theories, but he doesn't want to give out information. Well, the information factually might be what addresses it. Mika, go ahead. Final word.
I was going to say on this, you know, when you're looking at counterespionage, one of the ways that you establish that agency relationship is you're looking for financial ties. You're looking for some kind of quid pro quo payment there. And so I think it is really important that they are transparent on that. And if they're not going to be transparent, that the investigators get to the bottom of it.
All right, and as a final note, I want to take viewers behind the scenes here of TV News Magic. We did have an audio problem with Mika earlier, our fault, so we apologize for that and appreciate you joining. That was the issue earlier. Naveed Jamali and Miko Yang, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, now coming up, are the Democrats winning inside the White House? We will explain what that means. And also, later, amid Donald Trump's